entire population, then you're going to get these problems. So I don't know if that's answered your question at all.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Yeah, I would like to get your opinion on something. I noticed that nobody really gets very upset if I say E equals MC cubed. It's not disagreement that seems to bring people's ire to fore. But my Shia friend is just infuriated with how stupid his Sunni acquaintances are about religion, and my sister can't talk to her husband who's a Trumpist. Why is it that with religion and politics, we become furious and irrational, and we can talk very rationally about potholes?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Okay. So why can't we talk rationally about some of these things in politics that we can talk rationally about other things? Okay. I've noticed that same phenomenon myself, but with people. In my job, I'm required to be neutral politically. I'm sure I don't carry it off so much, but that's the official requirement. And when people have different viewpoints, some of my very conservative friends, it doesn't bother me at all. It really doesn't. I kind of enjoy hearing the different views. But when my mother starts talking about these conservative views, it really kind of bugs me. Why the difference? Okay. Well, the difference is that my mother's view is somehow a threat to me. People get angry when they're threatened. Okay, it's the fight part of the fight or flight or freeze response. Now, but instead of reacting to a tribe coming over the ridge, we're now reacting to threats to our self-esteem, threats to our way of life, threats to our society. That's what we're reacting to. But the reaction is the same as if we're going to fight the next tribe. So there's a lot of anger, a lot of blood pumping up, and everything else. So the fact that someone's getting angry about these things tells me that they're being threatened by something. Something about that is threatening. And that's where I would start with these people. Say, what is so threatening about the Sunnis? Well, what do you mean? They're not threatening. They're stupid. Yeah, but you're getting mad about it. People don't get mad about stuff they don't care about. People get mad about stuff that threatens them. So what's so threatening about that? And then hold the person accountable for their own reactions, is what it is. And for me, it bugs me that someone in my family, someone I like, can think like this. And I have to really twist my head around a little bit and say, yeah, but she will think like that. And somehow my brother, who has the same political views, doesn't bug me at all. Go figure. But that's the end. And it does get charged. And the sad thing is that once it starts getting, people are threatened and start getting emotional, then the rationality cuts out, which is why it's so important to break off the interaction for whatever time being you can, and hopefully let the emotions come back. Sometimes the situation doesn't allow that very well. If you're at a protest, for example, down in Charlottesville, not a lot of opportunities for people to break for a second, come back more rationally. That's why semi-formal interactions like this, they do have rules, and Jim elucidated many of the rules. That's what they're there for. They're there so people can talk rationally and logically as opposed to emotionally. That's what they're there for. And it really helps. And so you back people off, and then maybe if you have to force them, maybe have them write some kind of little essay or assignment that will force them to start thinking more logically and cognitively as opposed to emotionally. Okay, I guess I got someone here in the back.
I eat lunch every day with a group of men, and about a week ago, two of the men got in a very heated argument about gun control, and were standing up, yelling right in each other's face, and eventually it broke up. The more conservative member stayed away from lunch for about 2 days, and then he came back and he apologized to everybody there for losing his control. The other guy hasn't come back for a week now, and I'm wondering whether I need to speak to him and tell him that he should apologize to the other person he was arguing with, as well as the other people at lunch. I have a feeling that he'll get angry at me if I
Okay, so here's a couple men who got into an argument at lunch. What sort of a setting? Is this like a formal setting? Is this an informal setting? And so personal views have a little more reign than if you're having lunch at the company cafeteria, for example. And how do you bring people back in? Which is an excellent question, because this is for families too. Okay, I've got two brothers. One, he's conservative. Okay, he's fine. He's okay. And we understand that we don't agree with each other. Okay, that's fine. The other one, I haven't seen in 20 years. He's decided that his family is too threatening, and estrange himself from the family? Okay. What happens if he wants to come back? I'll welcome him back. Okay. But you gotta be very careful because he gets a little touchy. So I'll welcome him back. Okay. For your friend, not quite so dire, not 20 years, but it could turn into 20 years if you don't do something, right? So, and you're wanting to do it. What I would do is, as much as possible, this is unfortunate, I had to blow through the EAR section. David Burns of Feeling Good, the EAR technique is empathy, assertiveness, which is just saying your view of it, and respect. Your view, you stick with first person pronouns. You take responsibility for what you're saying. So you don't say, you need to come back, or you should apologize. No, he's too touchy already. You say, I miss you being there at lunch. Or you say, you know, it kind of hurts me that these things can lead to permanent things. Is there something you can do? You put yourself in what we psychologists call the one down position, to make him feel a little more in control. Because he's feeling threatened by this whole thing. Right? And your job is to make him feel as non-threatened as possible. You may want to start off by asking him, what were your views? What bothered you so much about that you can't come back? Okay. And get his view on it so he feels a little more in control and not so threatened. That would be my answer to him, to family members, everything else.
How should we deal with lying, both personally and politically?
Lying. How should we deal with lying? Well, I guess lying is one form of information management, of trying to eliminate other points of view by acting as if they don't exist. Okay. Well, but there's a tricky part of this, though. Okay. These people with the Miranda warnings on their forehead, right? They believe the lies they're telling. If you put them on a polygraph, they would pass. Okay, because they often believe it. Okay, sometimes it's very, instrumental in their lying. They're trying to get something out of it. Sometimes they really believe it. And so part of it is, I guess the answer to your question, how do we deal with lying, is to not treat it as a lie, to do what you can to not threaten the person and make that person feel like you look down on them, you're judging them, they're doing something wrong, you're chastising them as a child. It's not going to help. It's not going to help. Ask them about their views. There's a great little quote that David Burns has, I often say. He says, if you reject an accusation or a comment that you know is unfair and untrue, and you reject it, you will make it more valid. If you agree with that comment that is unfair and untrue, gradually it exposes itself as a lie. There's a technique in psychology called motivational interviewing, where doctors will go along with patients' views that they completely disagree with. So, tell me again why smoking is good for you. Okay. They don't say, what are you crazy? Smoking's not good for you. We know this, and here are all the data. Blah, blah. They don't do that. The person doesn't want to hear that. They say, tell me how smoking is good for you. And gradually, when the person has to be responsible for their own view, if it really is unfair and untrue, it'll start unraveling. Okay. So that's my best advice I could have. Yeah, you had your hand up. Just like somebody behind you.
I can speak.
Talk right into it.
Well, next.
Okay. I like to have discourse with people I don't agree with. And I just would like some ideas on how you do that. One of the things that I do is ask them to be a member of the other party if it's a party discussion, and tell me a politician or an individual that they really like in that party. And that gets a discussion without being threatening, but I'd like to know some other ideas of if you want to engage with people that you don't agree with, how do you do that?
Excellent question. So you want to engage with people you don't agree with necessarily. How does one do that? Well, semi-formal things like this is an excellent way of starting it off, but you probably have to be a little more careful than usual in making sure that the rules are followed, Robert's Rules of Orders or whatever, are followed. What works in my case is to be engaged in some other topic that we both like and we both enjoy. Okay, so and here's the nerd coming out of me. Okay, my particular passion, my love is model airplanes. Not the flying ones. Everyone says, oh, you fly. No, not the flying ones. The little tiny plastic ones. Okay, that's what I like. I go to contests. I have this whole group I do, blah, blah, blah. Most of these guys are pretty conservative. But we have a passion for World War II history, model airplanes, that sort of thing. It puts me in the same room with them. And we have a thing we both love, and there's a motivation for both of us to not get too far into our emotional, self-serving things. And it does help me go back and read up some other things. As one example, I was listening to NPR, I don't know, 3 months ago maybe, and the topic was gun control. And I've always been bugged by the people who are against any form of gun control, saying this is a right, this is our Second Amendment right, and you can't infringe on our rights. Okay, but yeah, but what about that first half of the Second Amendment? What about this well-regulated militia part? Okay, what about? Well, NPR gave me the answer by listening to the other side. They said back when the Constitution was written, a well-regulated militia was an individual person. Was an individual person. Every single citizen had a gun. Every single citizen was expected to take up arms and defend the republic. An individual was a well-regulated militia. And then it went on from there. And so throughout history, court cases have basically dismissed that first preamble of the Second Amendment, and frankly most preambles of most of the amendments, as not relevant to gun control. I learned something. Okay? And of course, putting yourself in a position with other people, you're going to learn things you don't know, which is terrific. Okay? But it won't necessarily be things you agree with. With my friend Mike, who's a big gun owner, I've got these guys who have like gun collections and everything, but they're all ex-military. They're all extremely careful. They all check the chamber. You know, I have no problems being around them at all. Mike said a very interesting thing. He said, you know, all these mass shootings, which they find as abhorrent as we do, the people who own guns, right? All these mass shootings, not one of them has been by an NRA member. How do we know this? Because if it was, we would know it. Okay. So I told him, you know, why doesn't the NRA take the initiative in controlling these things? In having some sort of thing. I don't expect that to happen. I'm not going to influence I'm not going to influence social policy like that, but it's a way to connect with him. Yes. You had a question before?
Yes,
No,
the
no,
words
no,
that
we're
we use.
supposed to do questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
This man had a
The
question.
words that we use. You talk about the opposite sex. Suppose that we talked about the different sex. Opposite immediately sets up a discourse. And so we keep on using the word opposite sex. Instead of using sex so much, suppose that we use people a little bit more.
Okay. Okay. So the question was, instead of saying opposite sex and opposite, and focusing on the differences and focusing on the opposition, instead focus on the commonalities. Absolutely. Okay. These are spouses. These are loved ones. These are people that are absolutely. Okay. When people try to make a point and try to highlight some aspect of it, like a difference, like a biological difference, then they will talk about things like male, female, opposite sex, right? And when I talked about that difference that Deborah Tannen talks about in her book, You Just Don't Understand, that's not true for every man and every woman. There are some men who behave in a more feminine way, some women who behave in a more masculine way. Most people at businesses and in business situations will behave in a more task-like way. So, you know, these things are sort of general, broad things. And anything we can do to correct misperceptions, especially misperceptions that are starting to lead to people feeling devalued and judged, is an absolutely good thing to do. Okay? So that's when you get ready to apologize and back off and say, I did not mean to offend you at all. Let me know how you're thinking. Because my guess is you're really talking about the same thing. I'm sorry, I'll leave it to you. I have to violate the rules here.
This is a spectacular list of sources. It's really quite beautiful. There's one more that fits in with some of your answers to very good questions, which is called humble inquiry. which is a book you may know. My wife teaches this stuff and showed it to me. But the heart of it is the simple reality that if you can ask a deeply astute question, rather than just assert how you feel, the chance of a productive dialogue goes way, way up. And the only asterisk I would add to that is, don't start humble inquiry, deeply effective, empathic, humble inquiry, unless you have enough energy to follow where it goes. Because you may learn so much that you can hardly handle what you learn.
I love it. Thank you very much. I'm actually not that aware. It sounds like a nice list, but of course it's a bit of a hit and miss over what my experience is, and I'm not trying to get away from that. Humble Inquiry sounds like a wonderful title. Crucial Conversations is not on this list. It should be. It's not on this list. It sounds great. There's a little kind of a joke saying in our family that says, the first rule of asking a question is that you want to hear the answer.
Yeah, that's what I get.
And so when someone asks me something I know they're not going to like, and I know they're going to give me a hard time with, I start off with that. And the kids know it to the point where they just kind of stop in the middle. Okay. You know the first one? Yeah, okay. They know it. But it's very true. And that's that humility of wanting to hear the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When someone asks you something, but there's only one possible answer because they have it in their head already, that's not a request, it's a demand. Okay. If you really want to request for information, which is what a question is, you have to be willing to get the information. And truthfully, you're not going to learn anything unless you learn something you didn't know already. So it's going to be information, and you're going to feel stupid because you didn't know it already. And that's okay. Your life gets a little bigger, but absolutely true. Excellent. Yes.
In preparing our young people for getting out in the world and behaving, could we not have a class, a mandatory class, in all of our public schools on the topics that we've just described and teach them? Because there's a lot. This was a great, by the way. Thank you for a very great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Wouldn't it make sense to have this presented to children?
Oh, I love it. Okay, so if you didn't hear, the question was, wouldn't it be great to have a class for students, for our children growing up, about this sort of discourse and how to foster a more genuine and more give and take sort of discourse? Huh. Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you do it? Unfortunately, what I hear secondhand, can't stop doing that. What I hear secondhand from teachers, I had an assistant principal talk about this a couple days ago, is that the students really don't want to hear it. The parents don't want to hear it. They want their view on. And he's an assistant principal in charge of discipline. His big headache is with the teachers supporting the students that they shouldn't get in trouble.
You could almost start that at a family level.
So-
Mommy, he's picking on me.
So, and if the consequences of dealing with that issue are greater than the consequences of ignoring it, it starts going in that whole direction. So absolutely, would that be a great thing for them? Absolutely. Have some sort of discourse, because it is a real life skill. And I worry with our technology and our increasing reliance on one-way communication, this process is just getting worse. Okay. Now, fortunately, there are some signs that are good. Jim sent me a couple articles that were very interesting. One was about disinviting people. The disinviting hit a peak in 2017. Why is people being disinvited? Because people didn't want to hear their views. But then it dipped again in 2018, which is nice. So it seems to kind of run its cycles, and that's what I can hope for. But that would be absolutely great. What a great life skill. Okay.
I keep mulling over something you said early on, because I realized that I was probably one of those liberals who thought it was fine to shout down a speaker. And I was thinking specifically if you had neo-Nazis giving an address on campus, which is a group that I'd certainly be inclined to shout down. What I hear you saying is it would be better strategy to listen to them respectfully, ask how they came to their conclusions, and make them show themselves as the idiots they are, rather than trying to shout them down.
Exactly. exactly. So,
I like that.
you know, give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves, right? And it's interesting you mentioned that particular example. 1977, I grew up in south of Chicago, in the corner of Indiana by Chicago. They say Indiana, it's really a suburb of Chicago. Our house is one house from Illinois. And so Chicago, basically. 1977 Chicago, neo-Nazis. Just ring any bells here?
Skokie.
Marching in Skokie, okay. And my girlfriend, a year older than me, another person smarter than I was, she got me on the speech and debate team, which helps me be so comfortable here, which is great. And her mother once came to us and said, I think it's horrible that they're letting those awful Nazis talk and ruining that nice Jewish community in Skokie. They shouldn't be allowed to talk. What was World War II all about? And my girlfriend and I looked at her and said, that's what World War II was all about. To have people have the freedom of expressing their views, as abhorrent and as terrible as you may think they are. And to listen to them respectfully, and if there really is no merit, like these lies, if there really is no merit, they will start to unravel. Okay? In many cases, you won't change any minds, but at least you're going to reduce some of the animosity that comes through it, which gets people nowhere. So, take the motivational interviewing approach and say, so tell me what's good about being a racist. Okay? Tell me the upside about being a white supremacist. And they'll probably tell you some interesting things. Because again, anger comes from being threatened. And they feel that their way of life is being threatened. The fact that their way of life may be based on inequity and bias and racism. I don't think they think that through so much. But, you know, that's what you're going to get. It'll probably be a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Or sometimes just say nothing. So I'll do one little more comment. Sometimes just say nothing. My conservative, I don't know if I identify anybody, a person I know, very conservative, was speaking to three of us, and he said, probably shouldn't swear here. Okay, another one of those rules, the semi-formal things.
Unitarians can swear, it's okay.
Hey, these gays, what's with all these gays? They should just take them all out and shoot them.
Unless it happens to be a child.
So no. And so we just kind of looked at him, and then went on with our conversation as if he had never spoken, which I thought was the best way of minimizing and making his comment impotent, because it had zero effect on the conversation at all. Yes?
Yes, so this is a very timely discussion, obviously, given what's going on in our country and the world. But it seems to me that civil discourse, the level of, when it's better than others, there's a pendulum. And I wonder if you see any signs that it could be getting better. People would be more accepting of good civil discourse. Do you see any signs at all of that?
What an interesting question. These things do tend to run in cycles. These issues are not new, as I mentioned. Is it getting better?
No.
I've got a feeling it's going to get worse before it gets better, except that one little glimmer, looking up, disinvites, that's down now. Okay. My guess is there's a secondary view of the basic tone set by political leadership in this country. And once the midterm elections happen, then you're getting a little bit of a tone. Now there's a little bit more of a balance. Before there's more of an unbridled kind of attitude toward poor discourse. And you're getting that back a little bit. So probably a little bit. Is it going to get worse before it gets better? That's my guess. There's a certain inertia that goes along with these things too. Yeah.
In listening, you have several times said, if you listen to what you consider an opposition argument and ask them to justify it, it will unravel. I suspect the unraveling sometimes takes some time. So one of the problems I anticipate is that if you're expecting a rapid change, you will be disappointed. So along with acceptance, you must accept the fact that this change, if it's going to occur, may take some time.
Absolutely. It requires patience, the power of not saying something, the power of just letting it go and letting it rest. But sometimes it may surprise you. With this cop, okay, when I started off my talk about the police officer, right? Being in Cleveland, we talked about the Tamar Rice incident. Right? And he's talking about, Ferguson, and said, well, you're here in Cleveland, we have the Tamar Rice thing. He goes, that was a justified, he's talking technically, that was a justified incident. In fact, I brought it up by saying, well, there are some, technical issues with the Tamar Rice thing that I can imagine the police had to respond to. Here's some large person waving a gun in the park, That's what they saw. And he goes, yeah, but you know what? He said a couple things then. This is just my first interview with him. And it's really not my place to have this political debate with him, right? I'm supposed to be doing the psychologist stuff. But he goes, well, there are a lot of procedures that weren't followed there. And there are a lot of people who shouldn't be cops. He said both of those the first day.
What was the second thing?
There are a lot of people who shouldn't be cops. Who are cops and shouldn't be cops. They do it for the wrong reason, for the authority, for whatever. Okay. The next day, the guy who got beaten up by the cops, okay, I said, is there any role you had in this? He goes, well, I did kind of resist and hit one of the cops. But so the first day, both of them were able to start looking at the other direction. I think because they felt comfortable in that situation, doing it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
I think we could go on with this almost all afternoon, but there's a special music program up in the sanctuary, classical guitar and flute. That's supposed to start at 10:40, and some of you may want to leave and go up for that. And of course, others may want to go up for the regular service at 11. I know John would like to go and hear the classical guitar concert, but he has marital duty.
Did I mention what that is, by the way? My wife is in the bell choir at Fairmount Presbyterian Church, and they're having their end of the year kind of party. But since she's leaving for Utah in 2 weeks, this becomes her farewell party. So I really have to do that.
So we will try not to run John into the ground so he gets to Fairmount Church in time for the
Actually, the party's at nighttime.
parties at night.
So I may get some guitar after all.
Anyways, John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Those of you who want to leave, please do so quietly, so we may have some other questions.
I think we should let him go.
John, what do you think?
Probably around before 11, 5 to 11, so 10 to 11. Because Fairmount goes from 10 to 11, so they're not going to start at that time.
One other thing. I have one other announcement. Next week.